Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Wilmette Institute's recurring webinar series. Our objective is to highlight the immense diversity of the Baha'i teachings and the ways they contribute to the contemporary world, particularly to the prevailing discourses of society. In today's session, we have the privilege of listening to Dr. Farzin Aghdasi as he delves into the theme of artificial intelligence and ethics. Our webinars are free, live streamed on YouTube, and accessible later on SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We hope you enjoy the program and invite you to share it with others, and of course, let others know about this program. Now, let me make a couple of announcements before we actually introduce the speaker. We have coming up at the Wilmette Institute 4 courses that it's going to be offered through the Graduate Theological Union of Berkeley, California, starting about, I think it's January 30th of 2024. The 4 courses are Reconstructing Blackness, Anti-Racism and Unity in the U.S., Approaches to Nonviolent Social Change, Introduction to Baha'i Theology, and Introduction to the Baha'i Faith, sort of Baha'i Intro 101. For people interested in taking these courses, for credit, if you are a student at Graduate Theological Union, there's a little bit.ly here on the screen, which you might want to write down or photograph, and that will take you to SONIS, the course catalog, and then you have to select Wilmette Institute for the campus in order to come up with these particular courses. If you're a student at the University of California at Berkeley, email Chitra Golestani at cgolestani@wilmetteinstitute.org. Both graduate and undergraduates are welcome to apply. The course is offered at both levels, and there's more information at the Wilmette Institute's webpage at gtu.edu. In addition to this, let me also mention our upcoming extension courses, which are non-credit courses, and upcoming webinars. We have 2 upcoming courses, one starting in 2 days, Cultivating Capabilities of Transformative Leadership, and another one a week after that, Thursday the 15th of November, Writing Biographies and Histories, the latter being a course helping people who have a biography to write or a history to write or a memoir to write to learn about the ethics, learn about the sort of etiquette of how to write these things, and to consult with professional authors to gain their experience in the course. Finally, we have one webinar coming up before the end of 2024, The Rache Amma in Living Color by Karen Webb, a student at the United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities, a Baha'i working on her master's degree. And that particular course is going to be on Sunday, December 10th, so a little over a month from now, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time. Now, of course, let's move on and introduce our speaker so that we can actually hear our speaker today. We're quite anxious to get started on that. Farzin Aghdasi, a longtime Baha'i pioneer to Africa, intimately involved in the development of the training institute process in Southern Africa and, of course, now in North America. He was in Southern Africa for 19 years as a university professor of engineering. In the United States, he has served as a Continental Counselor for the Americas and is now Secretary of the Regional Baha'i Council for California. He has a PhD in electrical engineering and specializes in computer vision and artificial intelligence. And of course, that's exactly the topic he will cover today when he talks about artificial intelligence and ethics. Currently, he's working for a large AI company in the Silicon Valley, right in California near GTU. Thank you so much for joining us, Farzin. We're really excited to have you with us tonight, and we look forward to your presentation. So,
thank you very much, Bob. So when the Wilmette Institute invited me to consider talking about this subject, I was trying to balance, because both of these subjects are such deep subjects, and you're all familiar with the amount of public discourse that is now talks about artificial intelligence, and of course ethical questions are all around us. The news, the media, the stories of war and peace, numerous stories are all laden with subject matters that are really have a direct bearing on how we want to live our lives as far as ethics is concerned. So what I will do in this talk is to first maybe lay out a conceptual framework, a framework that can guide us not only in what we talk about in this webinar, but also in the way we act in our lives. So that's the conceptual framework I will talk a little bit about. Then I will introduce a number of systems that are commonly referred to as artificial intelligence systems, talk about their genesis. My hope is to demystify this subject. The problem that many thinkers refer to as the alignment problem has to do with the fact whether the purpose of humanity and all these various intelligent agents, if they are referred to as such, software systems, hardware systems, and so forth, whether the aim and the goal of these systems are compatible. That is the alignment problem we will talk about. We will conclude by really thinking about how important it is to acquire knowledge at a vast scale and use this knowledge to guide humanity. And of course, all of that goes into our contributions to building a new civilization. And as Bob mentioned, we will have a Q&A session at the end, and I look forward to that as well. So the first thing to consider, elements of a conceptual framework. So the elements, so this has been taken from a statement written by the head of the Baha'i faith. There's an institution called the Universal House of Justice. It's an elected institution. It is situated on Mount Carmel in Haifa, Israel. And what the House of Justice has done, so the House of Justice actually sits in close communication with the national spiritual assemblies in 180 some countries in the world, and those national assemblies sit in close contact with local Baha'i communities and local spiritual assemblies and so forth. So think of this as a network, global network that goes from the neighborhood to the city, to the region, to the country, to the continent, and then globally, and communicates it back and forth in a very coherent way. It is able to think as one soul in 8 million bodies and such. So the Universal House of Justice has positioned the Baha'i faith for now several decades to adopt a humble posture of learning and to operate in a mode of learning. Such, which is really unusual for a religious community to adopt this posture, but that is the posture of the Baha'i faith. And the framework that we want to describe also came not as a result of somebody thinking of some theory, but as a result of numerous social activities, efforts in trying to build communities in villages in India, in South America, in Asia, in Africa, in the conglomerate cities, in the metropolises of the West, in Europe and North America, and so forth. And the result of this learning process has been this framework that we want to talk about. This statement about infusing the spirit of Baha'u'llah's revelation should be read. There are different ways of reading it, but of course there is a religious component to it. But actually we can think about this as a spiritualization of the planet, not so much worrying about the necessary theological aspects of one religion versus the other, but rather about the common humanity, the common religion. This is that changeless faith of God that Baha'u'llah speaks of, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. And so this framework is in the service of what? It's in the service of this vision that Baha'u'llah has said, that all men have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. So it's all men, not all Baha'is. All people, men and women, all people have been created by God to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. When we realize this, this is the foundation of the unity among all of us. Let us spend a few moments thinking about what does it mean to say that we have a framework. What is a framework? Many different ways of understanding it, but imagine a painter that is painting on a canvas, and the canvas is affixed to a usually wooden square that constitutes the framework. So the painter can paint anything he wants on this canvas, but he cannot go outside the framework. By going outside the framework, he loses his ability to paint. So if we use that analogy and think about a framework and say, so what can be a framework for action or for study? We will come in a moment and talk about the elements of this framework, but whatever those elements are, this framework cannot be so rigid. It is not about the list of do's and don'ts. As you will see, the elements, they are fundamental principles that can govern all of our lives individually and collectively. So if it is not rigid, then in what ways can it be flexible? So we refer to it as an evolving conceptual framework. Think about having a framework that dictates what to do and how to study and how to think about certain problems and so forth. And then ask yourselves, as we learn more, surely this framework itself can evolve. So it will evolve in the light of learning. So that's what we mean by an evolving, not a rigid conceptual framework. So the Baha'i community, how many millions they are actually living this. So this is not some conceptual, not some theoretical construct. This is a living thing. The Baha'i communities are organized in their localities or in their neighborhoods or in a group of communities together referred to as a cluster. And these clusters engage in a regular 3-monthly cycles in which they first study the reality, they consult, they read their communities, they plan lines of action, they act out those plans, and then they come back after 3 months and reflect on it and so forth. So this cycles of activity provides for a living, breathing, you breathe in and out, and that supports our life. And so this cyclical form of action, reflection, provides for the Baha'i community to continuously to learn, to adapt, to absorb new things, and so on and so forth. So I will talk about those new things in a minute when we talk about artificial intelligence. But let's, as I promised, let us think about these elements of our framework. What is the elements of our framework? So one of those elements is oneness. We believe in oneness of mankind, oneness of God, and oneness of religion, and maybe many other forms of onenesses, but at least those three. So we want this to be an element of our framework, meaning whatever we do should promote the oneness of humanity. If you say something or do something that brings division, discrimination, oppression, that's not going to last. That's not going to be good. That's not, then you're going outside of our framework and you cannot paint anymore. So whatever we say, whatever we do, whatever technology, whatever science, whatever ethics we develop has to fit within this underlying spiritual principle of oneness. Another one is justice. Very clear. So many people talk about justice. But we want to see justice actually implemented in human society. And how is it possible? Is the current forms of governance that we have in the world, does it lend itself to justice? If not, can we join hands as one human family on the planet and devise new mechanisms, new methods of governance that are global, that can bring about justice? We believe that there is truth, and that we all should encourage in our children and ourselves to love truth. And so this truth can be discovered, even though people have different perspective, different views, different takes on reality. But through communication, through consultation, it is possible to express our love for truth by sticking with the fact, and that's what brings the Baha'i faith so close to all those disciplines of knowledge that are based on fact. So there's also this innate thirst for knowledge. There's an attraction to beauty. So these are all elements of our framework. Really, every one of these subjects can be the subject of a whole hour's talk. So I will not go through in great detail, but this posture of learning. And then let me say a few words about the twofold moral purpose. Every one of us, we have these twofold moral purpose in our lives, and that is to transform ourselves, to become better, to acquire skills, to acquire knowledge, to acquire beauty of one form or another, mostly internal, referring to our lives, our spirits, our minds, our hearts, and then also to realize that this our goal is not only to improve ourselves, but also to improve our society, our neighborhood, our environment, the community that we belong to. And more than just a twofold moral purpose is that the happiness, the well-being, the security of the individual is unattainable unless we have this element of also happiness, security, and for the whole society. So the best interests of an individual are served in the same way as the best interests of society. They are not divorced from each other. And we can define your society as your family, you can define it as your city, you can define it as your country, but the best definition would be to think of society as a global society. So our allegiance is to the whole human family. All right, we can say really a lot about these elements, but maybe we'll come back. And of course, as we talk, if some things come to your mind, I'm sure you will jot down your questions, and we'll come to talk about those. Let's say a couple of things. If you have a framework, the framework should be consistent. You cannot say, I believe in oneness, but my business relies on creating divisions. Then your actions and your words are not coherent. So the framework has to be free from contradiction. We have to free ourselves from fragmentation, meaning, you see, reality is one. It's not fragmented. But when we want to study reality, naturally we have to specialize. We study physics, we study chemistry, we study biology. So we fragment reality. But we should always remember that this analysis, this separation of parts, should be complemented by a synthesis where we join them back together and say, what is the total reality? If you're doing farming, then there is a chemistry, there is a biology, there is a something from the soil science and so forth, but you have to combine them together. And this is true also in technology, in society, everywhere. So remember this, fragmented minds ask fragmented questions. They will receive fragmented answers because they ask fragmented questions. And this confirms for that person that reality is really fragmented. Fragmented minds ask fragmented questions, which confirms for them that reality is fragmented. So let's avoid that. So when we do that, we say that religion and science, of course, when we say religion, we're not talking about rituals or about the clergy. We're not talking about that at all. We're not talking about churchianity, not at all. We are talking about, or any other form of religious ecclesiastical order. We're talking about spirituality. We're talking about belief. If you look at inward, we have a inner reality. Other than our molecular reality, which is our body, we have an inner reality, which is quite distinct from our molecular reality. So when I say religion, I'm referring to that reality and what governs that reality. So It is one of the foundations of Baha'i principle, and I leave it for other speakers and other sessions to talk at depth about the harmony of science and religion, but it is unavoidable for us. In some sense, if artificial intelligence is science and ethics is born from religion, then coherence only will come if we are able to combine science and religion together. Many wonderful articles are written about this subject. Very clearly, we need to accept diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of race, diversity of nationality, and include everybody at the table so that we can combine these things together. It is true that technology has an imperative. You know, when you discover something, then you cannot avoid discovering the next thing. And this so-called technological imperative drives the technology in a certain direction. But we have to make sure that that technology is safe, it is secure, it supports the privacy of the individuals and so on. One notion is to think about, when we want to read the reality of a society, is to think about that it is made of these three: the individual, the community, and the institutions. And each one has a goal, each one should move in a certain direction and should reinforce one another. None of them can achieve their ultimate goal, their existential goal, without support from the others. And the Baha'i view that the human history, as we go from humanity's childhood to adolescence to maturity, these two processes of integration and disintegration are at work. And we can see all around us. Every day we see things falling apart, wars starting, families disintegrating. And at the same time, we see a large number of people of goodwill coming together in consultation, in various agreements and so forth. You know, a century ago, nobody talked about war crimes. War was war. But now we ascribe crime to certain activities of war. So that is part of the process of integration. All right. Looking at my time, I better talk about artificial intelligence a little bit. Let me start from back when. Scientists, applied scientists, engineers were busy processing signals that comes from sensors, microphones and cameras, pictures and sound, speech, or that which we type on a computer keyboard in the form of a text. So processing the natural language or audio and so forth. So that is the engineering origin of signal processing, and looking for patterns. Sometime in the second half of the 20th century, an idea came about that maybe instead of just developing for algorithms that can analyze those signals and then produce something useful, maybe we can do something else. Instead of us engineering an algorithm, we can teach it to a machine. The machine is a network. Each element is inspired by the functioning of a neuron. And so a connection of them, many of them put together, will give you maybe it will be a line, a layer of many neurons, and then new neurons are connected to the next layer, and so you have multiple layers. And when the layers become large, you have a deep network, and a deep network can learn. And the way you teach the network is this. Let's say you want to teach the network to differentiate between dogs and cats. Very simple. So you show the pixels of an image of a cat, the actual values of those pixels, there are some number, right? Between 0 and 255. So you feed that the vector of those numbers, multiply them by some weighting, and then add these up and maybe add some nonlinearity and do multiple layers of this, and then some output comes out. Initially, the weights are all random. You don't know what the weights are. And so the answer will be wrong. You show a cat, and the answer is not a cat. The answer is maybe something else. So then you say, okay, how far am I from the cat nest? And then you back propagate this through the model and assign and adjust the weights. And after some optimization, what you have is that now the network has learned. but it has not memorized. It has generalized. What this means is this. Now you show it a picture of another cat that this computer has never seen, and it is capable of correctly saying that this is a cat. Wow. This is a discovery of science, that many small elements of computation added together in this connectionist form can actually classify dogs and cats. And it can do so at the level of human accuracy, sometimes even better than human accuracy. And so when this is found, we say, can I do it with sound? Can I do it with language? Can I do it with text? And that's how in the recent years, meaning just the last few years, these large language models are born. And then, so I talked about artificial neural networks and deep learning, large language models and so on. Something new came out in 2014 that are called generative AI models in this framework of the neural network. These are the models that actually generate something. That means they make stuff up. So maybe you take a pen and or maybe a mouse and draw the outline of a tree and a sky and a car, and it will transform that into a realistically looking picture of a tree in a meadow and a road and a car and a sky. That is realistic. So you say, wow, I can generate stuff. So this was the origin of ChatGPT. Let me emphasize, as I explain this scientific part of this, the machine itself is a piece of silicon. It is actually, you already have it. It's probably in your pocket. It's an iPhone or a laptop. That's what the machine is. The machine itself is absolutely not conscious. It is not sentient. You may have heard some employee of some large company, after one model was published, said, oh, our model is sentient. And he was fired immediately. It is not sentient. In fact, some authors argue that the machine itself is not intelligent. And in fact, it's not even artificial. I mean, is your laptop, do you refer to your laptop, this is artificial laptop? No, it's a laptop. It's a machine. So think about this. We anthropomorphize. That means we, as though a disembodied form of human intelligence could exist, which exists in science fiction and in ghost stories and such. And now we ascribe that to this machine. But don't misunderstand me. The machine is very useful. You know, a calculator is very useful. It can calculate things so fast, better than most humans can do. But we shouldn't anthropomorphize it and say, oh, wow, look at this calculator. Okay. So many areas of applications, depending on whatever your profession is. As you can see on the screen, that acronym MOOCs stands for Massive Open Online Course Systems. These are educational programs online. Stanford University offered the course. 600,000 people took the course. They did the homeworks. It was marked, and they and they got a certificate. So you can eventually, through AI, we can provide a teacher for every student, a doctor for every patient, everywhere in the world, through the aid of these tools. So these tools can be very useful, but they can also be very harmful. So let's talk a little bit about the uses of this generative AI. First of all, let me talk about this electricity. Imagine human society 2 centuries ago or a little bit more, when electricity was not yet discovered or not used till today. You know, I understand that in Canada a few years ago, one day internet went down, an entire city. It's not funny, you know. You cannot buy anything anymore. Many of us walk in our wallets and we just carry credit cards, no cash. And so if the electricity is down, you cannot buy anything anymore. So we have become dependent on these, what we call societal infrastructure. Invention of AI in this 21st century is almost equivalent to invention of electricity. That means it will change everything. It will change our workflows. It will change the way accountants and lawyers and physicians and doctors and manufacturing and film and media and everything will change. So welcome to the future. It will change. You might as well get along with it, learn how to use it, and we should put guardrails so it is not abused. All right, you notice I do not read my slides. I hope that you do. So there are some concerns. Let's talk about these concerns. First of all, how it works. Similar to ChatGPT. You have to first start with a prompt. Either you ask a question, find me the person with a blue jacket. That's a prompt. There is an emerging discipline called prompt engineering. They can work in computer science area. They will not program in Python or C++ or whatever older language, Fortran, COBOL. No, you know what is the newest programming language? Wait for it. English. You can program these machines in English. So, so you start with a prompt, and some new content will appear. Could be music, could be video. You can feed it the script of a movie. And in a few years' time, maybe, an entire movie will come out that are photorealistic. That's what the whole strike about the actors was all about. So, what is the problem? So many good uses. What is the problem? The problem is this, that this new generative AI, this time I will read my point. This new generative AI sounds plausible. It sounds coherent on the surface because it sounds so human-like. But there's no guarantee that it will be. And it can churn out all kinds of rubbish. It can give all kinds of, and you may have read stories in the media of the lawyer who went to an actual court armed with AI the night before, and all the cases he was putting the numbers didn't exist. All right, so that is a problem, and that problem is, we admit there's a problem. We call it what? Generative AI. What does that mean? It means that the machine generates content. It means it makes stuff up. Don't rely on it. That is the ethics question. Because of this combination of human-like language and apparent coherence, this is the deceptive part. And because it has this convincing realism, that is what it introduces this set of AI risks. So those are our problems. Privacy can be infringed. You do not know. So governments need to come up with regulation, as they recently did. In the US government recently came up with an executive order, not yet a law, that all AI-generated content must be watermarked. That means in a corner of it, you must say AI-generated to differentiate it from real. And that has to be enforced by law. There are problems of transparency. When an algorithm misbehaves, we go back and fix the algorithm. When deep learning neural network misbehave, we don't know where to fix it because we didn't engineer it. What we did is that we applied an optimization algorithm to reduce some mathematical function on an energy landscape. So we do not know how to fix it. That is a problem. So it is not explainable. Some people say AI must be, and there is a whole branch of AI called explainable AI, interpretable AI. So we need those guardrails. How are we doing with time? Okay, my time is getting short. So let me describe the alignment problem. If you use AI to recognize human faces or genders, by definition, this AI will be faulty. I will show you, because this is the case. When you train a neural network, you have to provide data to it. That data must come from natural sources, like the cats and the dogs, right? If in the world you had many, many, many more cats and only very few dogs, that network will be always biased to say everything is a cat. The bias is embedded in the data, not in the algorithm, not in the neural network, in the data. And if there is some race or some gender, some color of skin, some criminal record, something that is a minority, that minority will be discriminated against by definition. We know this. It's an established fact of science. Therefore, criminal justice systems should not use AI to predict which criminal, if we release them on a parole, that they will be repeat offenders and will come back to jail. That, and the history of AI, I'm afraid, is full of these misuses and abuses. So that is the problem. All right. Many more topics here, but in the interest of time, I will move on. AI is not evil. AI is like electricity. Yes, it can be used for evil. Put guardrails around it. How? Let me discuss about that. You see, what I explained in the beginning about the Baha'i community in millions of places, in towns, in small groups, in families, and so on. What they do is that they study, plan, act, then reflect and come back. That is the centrality of knowledge. We want all of humanity to join us in this. Nobody is talking about a religious conversion. We are talking about join hands. If you are a well-wisher of humanity, what I want to do is not to divide the society into advanced societies who make technology and the global south that is only a consumer of tech. No, that's not oneness of humanity. If you want oneness, then let us provide that you see, when a child is born, it doesn't matter which continent it is born. That child has the capacity to be a contributor to knowledge. Let's create the environment, the social environment, so the child can do that. Let's make knowledge the central process of social existence. Today, making money is a central process of social existence. Please, let us change that. The central process of social existence should be acquisition, this application, diffusion of knowledge. Knowledge for everyone, for all humanity, each according to their own capacity. Let us treat science and religion as two equal sources of knowledge for study and action, complementary sources of knowledge. Each knowledge, whatever we learn is a source of insight. So now the new insight is that, you know what? I can have a laptop with a GPU in it, and this laptop can generate content. You can write an essay and tell it to turn it into a video, and it will do it realistically very soon, or almost there. So this is a new insight. Let's make sure that there's enough guardrail so that we use it properly. Access to knowledge is the right of every human being, and participation in generation, application, and diffusion is a responsibility that all must shoulder in the great enterprise of building a prosperous world civilization. That is what we want to do. All right, let us see how we can contribute to building a new civilization. You see, what appears to be called for in any given region or micro-region or cluster of the world is the involvement of a growing number of people in a collective for learning, in a collective process of learning, one which is focused on dynamics of a path that conduces to the material and the spiritual progress. So progress should be both spiritual and material. Such a process would allow its participants to engage in the generation, application, diffusion of knowledge, a most potent and indispensable force in the advancement of civilization. These are some passages from the writings of Baha'u'llah, in the writings of the Baha'i community, regarding the importance of unity, to make sure everybody can have access to knowledge. And I will conclude with this slide. That everyone should be involved, as I just said. All people should be involved. That means if you want, AI will not stay in North America. It will not stay with a few companies in Silicon Valley. AI will go everywhere in the world, just like cell phones went everywhere in the world. So let's make sure that everybody, according to whatever the circumstances is around them, that they can be able to implement it by not blindly as consumers. Let's not divide the world into producers and consumers. We know that this new discovery is potent, that it will change everything, that it will have unintended consequences. Therefore, let's put the ethical guardrails around it. The experience of the Baha'i faith in community building, in social action, and in public discourse offers a working model for all societies to achieve ethically coherent results. Then I have some references for you and so on. If there are any questions, I will be happy to take those questions.
Great. Yeah, we have things beginning to pop into the Q&A and into the chat as well.